Welcome to Gateways, a short story reading series from Otherworld Theatre. I'm Ansel Birch, the curator for the series, and I want to thank you for joining us for this video version of our usual monthly reading. This special pre-recorded presentation is a continuation of our ongoing project to give science fiction short stories a place to shine through the talents of some of Chicago's amazing actors. Every month we choose 10 writers, give them a prompt, and 5 days to write. At the end of those 5 days, their work is breathed to life as part of this reading series and its companion podcast. This month's prompt is, Everything is in this box. Everything. Our first story is Don't Worry About the Frogs by Eliza Marley. Eliza Marley lives in Rogers Park and spends her time drinking tea by the lake when it's not closed and watching old horror movies. She is a graduate of Loyola University Chicago's creative writing program. She is a writer of magic realism and likes to explore the folds in the fabric of reality and how they become see-through if you hold them up to the light.
Don't Worry About the Frogs by Eliza Marley. Something needed to be done about the croaking. The constant noise from beneath Sandy's window had been driving her insane for days. Sandy's apartment was bare, possessions still packed in cardboard boxes, mattress on the floor in a corner. There was nothing to do but lie in bed, stare at the ceiling, and listen to the croaking. She had closed the window already, but the frogs were still there, calling out to anyone who would listen. Sandy started to look for an empty container. She had a soup pot buried somewhere. That would be perfect. Or a casserole tray. But for now, a shoebox that held CDs would have to do. The frogs had been eggs when Sandy moved in a few weeks ago. A small cluster laid too late into the season, right into the stagnant water of the small courtyard pond of her building. Sandy figured they would never hatch. But they did. Small tadpoles swimming back and forth through the shallow water. Now they were fully grown, stuck in that pond, wading back and forth with nowhere to go. Sandy started to get nervous. Sandy had grown up practically out in the woods, suffocated by the long grasses and overbearingly shady trees. It was too noisy, too spread out, empty and filled at the same time, leaving Sandy with a desire for her own little corner of space to fill. The apartment had been perfect until the frogs started. They croaked all the time. She had ignored it for the last few days, focusing on her own bare walls and trying to get up the nerve to unpack. It kept her up at night, and enough was enough. Sandy took the shoebox down to the courtyard. She padded across the gravel and scooped up the frogs. They didn't even put up a fight. There were 5 of them, small, probably not getting enough to eat. In the morning she could find somewhere to take them. They would like a nice park, somewhere with more bugs. It was darker than she remembered. The street lights had come on now. The iron gate at the front of the building was creaking, and Marissa would soon be home. Sandy wasn't sure if Marissa was her real name. The girl looked about Sandy's age and always came home at night. Long brown hair plastered against her head and tired feet shuffling through the gate. She was a waitress, probably. Marissa lived in the apartment across the courtyard from Sandy. Their ground floor windows were perfectly aligned. Sandy had watched that first night as Marissa slammed the gate shut loudly with clinking keys, made her way into her own apartment. Lights on, she had disappeared for a minute before returning in pajama pants with a toothbrush sticking out of her mouth. Sandy had watched from her own window, while Marissa hopped around her cluttered apartment, dancing to a song Sandy couldn't hear. Marissa had made coffee that night and poured it into a mug before going out of view and turning off the light. Sandy had wondered why Marissa would brush her teeth before making coffee. But that wasn't the sort of question Sandy wanted to introduce herself with, and neither was explaining why she had a wet box of frogs. Sandy hurried back inside. Water already leaking through the shoebox and dampening her sweatshirt, she hurried through the apartment, leaving behind a trail of water all the way to the bathroom. She carefully dumped the frogs in her bathtub and ran the water so that they had something to swim in. Looking around at her empty bathroom, Sandy floated the lid of the shoebox in the bathtub so they could float on it. The soggy bottom half she left it in the sink. The frogs were quiet now, taking in their new surroundings. Now Sandy could find her soup pot and take them to a park tomorrow morning. A loud sound from the window brought Sandy back out from the bathroom. She peered out and watched as the light of Marissa's window came on. There were string lights framing the window and lacy yellow curtains she always kept open. Sandy could see a framed poster of some people dancing and a white cabinet that had a microwave and coffee maker balanced on top of it. Sandy imagined the rest of her apartment was just as brightly decorated. Marissa put something into the microwave and then walked back out of view. It made Sandy think of the house she had left. It had been creaky and colorful, filled with sun from mismatched windows and brightly painted cabinets. There had been plants and art strewn about. It was always filled with the buzz of chatter or flies in the summer. Now she sat alone in a fold-out chair surrounded by long, blank walls. The plainness had calmed her, a quiet buzz of potential that matched the hum of traffic outside her window at night. But it had quickly become overwhelming, too much space and no sense how to fill it. The frogs were croaking again from the bathroom. Sandy sighed and stepped away from the window and went to rustle through the fridge. Her sock dragged through the water left behind, soaking it. There seemed to be more water than she thought. Sandy grabbed an apple and went back to the window. The frogs continued. Marissa was back, shuffling back and forth through the apartment. Sandy opened her window and could hear the rustle of wind through the trees that lined their street, but could not hear anything from Marissa's window. She wished she could know what the other girl was listening to. What sort of music made her want to dance? Sandy finished the apple and moved to check on the frogs. Stepping back, her already damp sock dragged through the wet floor. This was definitely more water than there had been before. There was now a thin stream making its way across her floor, pooling in the middle of her studio. Sandy ran back to the bathroom. Had she left the bathtub running? Did one of the frogs manage to start the shower? The croaking inside the bathroom continued. Sandy pushed against the door, but it was stuck. She pushed harder, and the door opened, ripping through the vines that had grown over it and letting out a torrent of cold, murky water that splashed over her and into the rest of the apartment. Sandy took in the sight before her. There was water in her bathroom, but it wasn't coming from anything Sandy could see. It rose above the toilet and a bit below the sink. Sandy rubbed her wet socks against the ground and felt dirt and sediment instead of off-white tiles of her floor. On top of the water was a thick layer of green algae. Looking in, it seemed like it had always been there. There were lily pads with roots that swayed in the water. Vines crawled up her walls and hung down from her shower. The frogs were there, a couple swimming through the water, a couple more resting on the lily pads. One was sat on the shoebox lid, floating by slowly. The lid had a small sprout growing out of it. The frogs looked at her, impassive, still croaking. The marsh stayed put after Sandy closed her eyes. She squeezed them shut, counted to 10 slowly, and could still see the roots of the lily pads wading in the water. There was a soft buzzing, and Sandy watched a frog shoot out its tongue and catch a beetle flying by. Sandy took a step back, closing the bathroom door against the stream of water and moss flowing out. Enough water had gotten into the apartment to make a shallow pool. Minnows were swimming near her kitchen island. Moss was starting to grow up the sides of her fridge. Sandy's moving boxes had gotten wet and soggy, starting to sag and topple into the shallow water. Sandy reached into one and pulled out a mug, small and blue, with a chip on the handle. Sandy took another look at her drowned mattress and the dragonflies that were now circling it. She walked to the front door. The cattails were starting to pop up now in clumps. Sandy carefully opened the front door and stepped out into the hall. She peeled off her wet socks and tossed them back inside. They sank in the rising water, and Sandy spotted her apple core bobbing along the surface. She quickly closed the door before anything could escape. Out in the hall, Sandy did the best to squeeze out the water from her leggings and sweatshirt. The fabric was cold and heavy. Sandy wiped down her hair with her sleeves and made her way down the hall with her mug. She figured it was as good a time as any to have some coffee with a neighbor.
Gaby Fernandez is the special events manager at Otherworld Theatre. She's been an ensemble member since 2018. She loves creating, performing, and discovering new works with such a diverse and unique company. She has been professionally acting since she arrived in Chicago over 4 years ago and fell in love with the Chicago storefront theater scene. Would you like to suggest a prompt for a future edition of Gateways? You can leave us a suggestion in the comments, and we'll come around after to collect them. Our next story is One Bad Pickup Line by Ashley Retzlaff. Ashley is an English and theater teacher who writes a lot of poetry, a scrambling enthusiast who owns more half-filled notebooks than any hoarder could. She creates worlds where reality and hope clash. The miniature worlds she creates lie dormant in the notebooks until brought to life by a reader's voracious eyes and mind. But you have the power to set those stories free. Set them free.
One Bad Pickup Line by Ashley Retzlaff. How about this for a pickup line? She scooches closer to me on the couch, decreasing the space between us. She crudely points to her crotch and makes a motion with her open hand and suggests, in the slimiest tone she can muster, "Hey girl, everything is in this box." And then she whispers, ironically, and adds, "Everything." I push her back to her proper space on the couch and I begin to laugh uncontrollably. I tell her how vulgar she is and that I'd rather focus on our favorite episode of Parks and Rec currently playing on my old box TV. Season 3, episode 13. As we let the TV take up the mood she's created in the room, I begin to wonder why she'd say something like that to me. My mind begins to wander. It seems like I'm wrapped into watching Parks and Rec get wasted on Tom's almost deadly concoction, snake juice. A mixture of dangerous liquors that somehow tastes like Kahlua. But my real focus melts away where I find myself thinking about the best friend of 9 years sitting next to me. With the side of my eye, I can see her knees are pulled in close to her chest. The place where she lets out an occasional, guttural laugh. Her laugh is unapologetically genuine, and she makes strong guffaws whenever she hears a worthy joke or a cringy one. When she laughs, I see her perfectly imperfect smile. A unique and strange smile made up only of baby teeth because her adult teeth never came in. Someone else might have been embarrassed by this defect and hid her simultaneously small yet unencompassing smile, but not Lena. Her smile allures anyone within her aura, allowing her natural freckles and green eyes to be noticed. She's a contemporary Merida from Brave without the Scottish accent. One thought wanders to another as I compare Lena's outer appearance, and it parallels her personality. Lena defines herself as a lipstick lesbian, the kind of woman whom men are attracted to on the onset, someone who is conventionally pretty enough to pass as straight. Her appearance can fool them easily, but Lena is an honest soul who wouldn't let a guy hit on her to no avail. Just last week, when we were out at the bars with her work friends, Lena was approached by the most basic man any of us had seen. He looked like a Calvin Klein model who walked straight out of an advertisement and into our local dive bar, Hemi's. He approached the four of us by huddling and standing around a circular table because every other chair had been taken, squeezing himself in between myself and Lena. He looked right at her and suggested, "You know, the drink I'm about to buy you would taste much better if you could drink this sitting down." Then he gestured over to an unaccompanied chair at the bar that was protected by other attractive and well-groomed men who could only be his cronies. Lena didn't want to lead the poor guy on. Probably because she could sense he was pretty enough that people were rarely not smitten by his perfectly coiffed hair. "Come on," she began. "It's leg day. I would much rather stretch my legs after a long run while enjoying my drink with my coworkers." She gestured to all of us with a reassuring look so we'd understand that she wasn't going to leave our conversation. "But," she interjected, "my friend Cassie would love a seat. Why don't you offer her a seat and a drink?" As soon as my name was uttered, I immediately turned cherry Twizzlers red and looked down at my hands and my half-consumed gin and tonic. Lena lit a spark of hope in my chest with the possibility of a guy being interested in me. Instead, he exited our space with a sarcastic, "Thanks, but no thanks," and he went back to his general douchery. I was simultaneously flattered and upset by Lena. I thought she couldn't understand guys were interested in her because she was the typical beautiful redhead, but that attraction didn't extend to her overly lanky dishwater blonde-haired friend. I felt compelled to announce, "Seriously, Lane?" It was the nickname only she allowed me to use. "Don't you know I'm vying for plainest single in 30 award?" She frowned at me as I added this self-deprecating comment. Lena didn't tolerate other people being hard on themselves, especially me. "Hey, Spacey," she calls me back to reality on the couch. "Are you just watching this or are you just existing?" She inquires. I'm here, I retort. I had the following to make her laugh. "Do you honestly think I'm gonna miss Ron Swanson dancing with that little top hat on his head?" As I ask the rhetorical question, my left hand gestures quickly to the TV, and then it draws in just as quickly back to the couch. But instead of landing safely by my side, it brushes her knee, and a wave of panic and excitement surges through me. I look over to see if it's a feeling that Lena feels too, because her body starts to give off a different energy than it did before. Instead of crunching herself up, she seems more open and inviting. "Listen," she adds, "if you're not going to turn up the heat in this place, you cheapskate, you at least share your blanket with me." She scoots over closer to me again, and I finally realize I've been snuggled up under my chocolate-colored fleece blanket this entire time. I comply while responding, "Sure, steal the skinny girl's warmth." She clearly has enough to keep her warm, and I lift the left side of the blanket up so she can scoot in even closer to me. We've been friends for 9 years, but Lena is not one much for physical affection. I've only given her one hug the entire time I've known her, and it was by her rat's funeral, a much sadder occasion than reality might suggest. But now, she's close enough now that I can smell her coconut-scented body spray. She shows me affection by putting her head on my shoulder and inviting, "You hold a lot of warmth for a skinny kid, Cass," using the nickname only I allow her to call me. My mind searches for a time while Lena and I have talked about differing sexualities. She was unabashedly attracted to females, while I expressed if I found out I was anything other than straight, my parents would have my head on a platter. I'm watching Leslie Knope and Ann Perkins fight drunkenly on my small box TV while my best friend of 9 years is snuggled in a blanket next to me. I'm fighting my natural urge to kiss her, to kiss Lena, because it would ruin everything I am and everything my parents have taught me to be. Before I can overthink the situation too much, Lena moves her lips to my cheek and gives me a quick peck. "You're my Ann Perkins," she expresses while putting her head back on my shoulder. Maybe it was the Parks and Rec episode. Maybe it was because I was turning 30 soon. Or maybe it was self-discovery. But the next thing I know, I argue. "No, I'm your Ben Wyatt. For 9 years, Lena and I have been friends at work. We hang out on the weekends, we communicate in our secret language of Parks and Rec quotes and inside jokes, so Lena knows who I am and what I mean when I stake this claim. I turn to look at her, and her green eyes come closer to mine, then close as I have the best kiss of my life. My chest explodes, and happiness I felt for 30 years opens inside of me. A feeling my parents don't want for me. Realizing my conflicting emotions, Lena just makes a joke to ease my tension. I told you, I've got everything in this box. Everything. And this time, she doesn't need to make a vulgar gesture. I can tell she's just trying to make things easier on me. And somehow, her bad pickup line, well, it worked.
Coco Kasperowicz is a multidisciplinary nerd performer. The brains behind Chaotic High Femme, her social media and YouTube persona. She is also known as the body-positive nerd princess of Chicago, Lottie a la West. She graduated with a degree in musical theater from Columbia College Chicago and has performed in professional theaters across the Chicagoland area. Our next story is A Story in Which Nothing Happens by Michael Jachowicz. Michael has written sketches and comedy scripts for podcasts as well as some comic strips. You can hear some of his scripts with Starlight Radio Dreams, a Chicago-based comedy podcast. He tells us, "I found a quarter today, and I'm just happy to be here."
This is A Story in Which Nothing Happens. The crowded subway car was a cacophony of life, but Arabella could only hear the sound of her heart beating wildly in her chest. She tugged at the cuffs of the oversized club jacket she had found thrift shopping with Celeste. Celeste had told Arabella that a baggier jacket would look good on her. In fact, the more Arabella thought about it, she realized that Celeste had essentially picked out the entirety of her outfit. Even the beat-up old Chuck Taylors she bought back in high school were only to match with Celeste. Arabella was looking forward to seeing Celeste tonight. She was almost shaking. She was going to make tonight count. She was going to make something out of tonight. No, she was going to get everything. Arabella bit the inside of her bottom lip, which she often did whenever she was in deep thought. She thought back over all the years she had known Celeste, playing back the memories in her mind like a movie. Well, not so much like a movie, more like a music video set to some pop-punk song that she would listen to in junior high, probably something by My Chemical Romance, or some Nightcore remix of a Jimmy Eat World song. The memories of Celeste and her began to flow and shift, one leading into another in no particular order until they landed on a specific memory. The memory. It was when they were both in high school theater. Arabella and Celeste went out for the same role, and against all odds, Arabella got it. It was one of the proudest moments of her life, but then Celeste cornered her backstage after school. Celeste convinced Arabella to give up the part that she wanted and go back to stage crew. Arabella was happy to do it. Celeste's attention was everything to Arabella. The subway screeched abruptly to a halt. Arabella was snapped out of her thoughts and into her surroundings. She looked up to see what stop they had pulled into, but it didn't look like they had even made it to a stop. Outside the window of the subway, she could only see the tunnel walls. As she was looking out the window, she happened to make fleeting eye contact with the man sitting across from her. He seemed disheveled and panicked, which, to be fair, wasn't altogether uncommon for folk in the city. However, this guy seemed really shaky. His eyes kept darting to the door next to Arabella. She followed the man's gaze to the door, and, as if on cue, the door opened. A police android with a synthetic task force walked in. The android stood motionless for what felt like an eternity. Then its electric yellow eyes, began to glow bright as it silently and methodically scanned the subway car. Arabella clutched her jacket closed, trying to hide from the imposing officer. She hadn't done anything wrong, but she couldn't help herself. Something about the police androids unsettled her. Maybe it was how you could see their robot skeleton underneath their translucent navy blue skin. Watching the false flesh twist and stretch over the artificial man just reminded Arabella how fake they were, no matter how close to real the state tried to make them. Suddenly, the officer's head jerked towards the man across from Arabella. "Henry Gordolski, you have been charged with possession of illegal substances, including narcotics and stem splicers, with intent to use and or distribute. Come with me." The android's voice was calming and had the cadence of human speech, but was distinctly digital. Nothing more than an advanced simulation of a human's voice. The man sitting across from Arabella was sweating profusely, his eyes whipping frantically around the subway car. Arabella made sure she was staring at the floor, feeling her feet tremble. The man across from Arabella stood up slowly and shuffled towards the police android. As he got close, he pushed the artificial officer, which caused the blue automaton to stumble back a few steps. The man reached in his pocket and with blinding, inhuman speed, and pulled out a knife. In one fluid motion, the man struck at the machine like a cobra striking its prey. "Get fucked, you popo rod, you stupid ah!" The man was cut off as the android caught his knife-wielding hand midway through the stabbing motion and swiftly broke his hand. Then the android grabbed the man by the neck and squeezed. There was a loud crack, then silence. "Thank you for your cooperation. Have a great rest of the day." The android spoke genuinely, however, its words rang hollow as it dragged its victim off the train. The doors closed behind it, and the subway began to move again. In recent years, the state had really started to crack down on stem splicing. It was unpredictable and hard to control. Using stem splicers, people could rewrite their DNA to make themselves into anything. Of course, as with anything that powerful, stem splicers had major negative consequences with prolonged use. That's why the state created the Synthetic Task Force to combat the stem splicer threat. What had just happened to stem splicers like Henry Gordolski wasn't uncommon in the city. In fact, it was the new normal, but still, the car was silent for the rest of the ride. Arabella was so relieved to step off the subway, she actually ran to the nearest pillar and hugged it. She took out her phone to see where she was supposed to go to meet up with Celeste. It'll be good to be with friends after all that, Arabella thought to herself when she heard someone call out to her. She turned to see Celeste waving at her with a big smile on her face. Celeste was standing with a couple that Arabella didn't recognize, but she hardly noticed. She was drawn to Celeste. Her bright blue eyes and her curly blonde hair were so inviting and innocent. Arabella felt a smile force its way onto her face as it pushed past all the shit that happened on the subway, including digging up the memory from high school. It's in the past, Arabella thought. None of that matters now. Two friends embraced in the middle of the near-empty subway station. Celeste took Arabella by the hand and brought her to meet the two people she was with. One was just Tef, a burnout Celeste and Arabella went to school with. Arabella said hi to Tef, who just kind of widened their eyes at her. Tef was already strung out on something or other. They had always been a pothead, but it turned into some full-blown drug habit after high school. Arabella had even heard that Tef dealt stem splicers. The other person Arabella didn't know. She was tall and thin with strong features. She had white facial tattoos that contrasted elegantly with her ebony skin. Arabella wanted to ask if the tattoos meant anything, but then the woman looked at her, and Arabella forgot how to make words do the word thing with her mouth. "Is this everyone?" said the tall woman, her voice low and powerful. Celeste nodded and, in her usually bubbly way, started talking about how great Arabella was and how she was like a sister to her and they were family. Arabella couldn't help but be a little hurt at this description of their relationship. The tall woman held up her hand to signal Celeste to stop talking, her open palm turning into a finger pointed down the subway tunnel, meaning to head that way. As they walked, Arabella noticed the woman was holding a steel box. She was about to ask what it was, but before she could, the woman stopped. They were at their destination, apparently, an abandoned stretch of tunnel. The tall woman set the steel box down and took out 3 syringes. This is the primer. Inject this, then inject the stem splicer your friend has bought, and enjoy yourselves in the box, she said, handing out the syringes before standing next to the box like a statue. What does she mean? Arabella asked, sheepishly fiddling with the syringe she was given. It's like so cool, Bella, Celeste said, her voice ringing like a bell on a spring day as she shot herself off the primer. Tef brought some shrimp sauce stem splicers so we can take it and we'll just shrink small enough to party in this totally bitchin' club. Before she could say anything, Tef and Celeste are putting the stem splicer syringe labeled shrimp sauce into their arms. Tef looked at Arabella, handed her a syringe, and said, "Look, the box has everything. Sex, music, drugs, everything. Shit's lit." Celeste and Tef began to writhe and their veins began to glow. They both doubled over and Celeste fell to her knees. Arabella rushed to her side, but before she could do anything, Celeste began to shrink. Arabella's eyes went wide. She had heard of the wild effects of stem splicers, but she had never seen them in person. She watched as her friends' bodies contorted in unnatural poses as they grew smaller. There was also this horrid stench, like burning hair from the energy given off during the transformation. After what felt like both an instant and an hour, Arabella was towering over her 2 friends, who were now no taller than a grain of sand. She watched them march like ants into the box. Arabella looked to the syringes in her hands, and then to the tall woman who hadn't moved during all this. She then looked to the box which had swallowed Celeste. Arabella wanted for so long and so badly to be noticed by Celeste, but this was insane. Arabella dropped the syringes, her mind flashing back to the ride down here on the train and how much the man who was killed for the shit reminded her of Tef, how Celeste would never notice her. No, that wasn't it. Arabella's mind flashed back to the memory, and for the first time she saw it, really saw it. Celeste had noticed Arabella. She'd noticed her and decided she could use her. Arabella put her hands in the pocket of her jacket and walked down the train tunnel. She got nothing out of tonight, and that was more than enough for her.
Kate Akerboom is a multi-creative individual living in Chicago. She loves telling stories, especially about the past, and considers it an honor to tell the new ones that people come up with. By day, she talks about animals at Shed Aquarium. By night, she creates as much as she can. Kate is a proud graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, holding degrees in theater, performance, and history. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. If this is the sort of thing you'd like to be involved in, please know that you are welcome as a part of our community of writers and readers. You can follow us at facebook.com/gatewayesotherworld. There you can find links to our recent episodes, as well as links to put your name in as a writer or reader to be a part of the series. We are all big nerds here, and nerds do better in a community. That's science. Our next story is Moving Day by Kate Akerboom. Kate is a multi-creative individual living in Chicago. As a certified interpretive guide, she tells stories for a living, but cherishes every opportunity she has to write them down. You can interact with her on social media as Hestia on Fire on Instagram, Katie_Akerboom on Twitter, and listen to her voice reading Shakespeare as managing director at 14th Night Players on Discord.
The sun had been dying for centuries. Everyone knew that. However, suns don't just disappear out of thin air, but lo and behold, that's what happened. It was like the lights just went out in the middle of the day. It was the brightest and sunniest day of the year, and then it was pitch black. It had been that way for the last 50 years. Scientists had been baffled the entire time. In all other respects, the Earth had been operating normally. This day, though, was radically different. It started with a sudden drop, a sensation that could only be described later as being in the Tower of Terror at Disney World, but without a seat to strap you in. Humans around the world were startled and confused. Throughout this entire time, there had been no difference in how the world had turned, aside from the lack of light and occasional gentle movements. The looks of confusion of the top scientists in the world rippled through the surveillance room at the Pentagon. Since the eternal darkness, that's what the public called it nowadays, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. transformed into a station to monitor the world. NASA could no longer launch rockets into space. Something blocked them just as they began leaving the atmosphere, and many lives were lost trying to break through that invisible barrier. The stars had gone out too, not just the sun. All things previously comforting to the average person about the night sky were gone, leaving nothing but perpetual darkness. Luckily, the moon was still there, but dark now, without a sun to reflect light from. Another marked difference was the lack of movement. The Earth was still turning, but there was a sway that had developed over the last 50 years that had suddenly stopped. People all over the Earth were regaining their balance. Elderly people began weeping as the Earth stopped its sway for the first time since their youth. Younger generations were relearning to walk, feeling uneasy and unsure. Just as everyone began to regain their footing, there was a harsh shove that sent people flying into buildings, trees, walls, and each other, and then nothing. Artificial power was restored. The Pentagon leaders struggled to find answers, blaming the events on everything from a change in the atmosphere to climate change. Humans adjusted and kept on living. Those that survived the drop and the shove continued to go about their daily lives, sometimes staring at the blank sky and wondering what more could be out there that they just weren't seeing. "Where would you like me to place this?" A gesture from the home's owner indicated to the corner of the large white room. The box was set down, none too gently, and the mover turned to leave. The owner of the home, displeased with the handling of the box, stood. "Careful with that," she griped, striding over to the large box. "Those items are very delicate." The mover looked at the graceful woman up and down and shoved the box over with his foot where it hit the wall with a gentle thud. "I didn't hear anything break. Should be fine." He sauntered out of the home, which was cluttered with elegant furniture and boxes, leaving the woman to turn this new dwelling into her home. She located the hearth, lit a fire, and began sorting through boxes. The darkness on Earth lightened, ever so gently. Darkness remained, sure, but it was softer somehow, more gentle. Things began to feel safer for the humans, and they began to relax. However, only a few days after the fall and shove, there was a surprise no one expected. There was a loud crack like the sound of thunder or something breaking through the atmosphere, and then the whole world was washed in light. People screamed, not expecting the brightness and the pain of light searing their eyes. NASA began searching for a sun and could not find one. It's like they were in the middle of a clear, cloudless day, but there was no ball of light, just brightness. After several days of constant brightness, the swaying began again. This time, though, it was gentler, like being cradled by a mother. The lightness was receding, almost like a sunset, but not quite. More like moving away from the light source on a horizontal plane. All humans were outside, staring at the sky as for the first time in most of their lives, the stars began appearing one by one. The moon began to glow, and all of NASA and the scientists in the Pentagon cheered and sobbed and hugged one another as the night sky of movies and fairy tales was returned to them. Alone, a woman in a lone cabin smiled knowingly, nodding to the sky, and returned to her reading. "Welcome, grandmother," the woman said, stepping aside as an equally beautiful woman entered her new home. It was in less disarray than it was on moving day. However, boxes were still scattered about, half emptied or broken down and leaning against the stone walls. The hearth filled the room with an ethereal and warm light in the darkening night. The woman addressed as grandmother did not look the part. Dressed in green, the statuesque woman looked timeless, with a matronly way about her that was reassuring but powerful. Her bare feet made no sound as she crossed to the box in the corner that was so rudely dropped the week before. In the week since, the homeowner had opened the lid, but did little else, knowing she could not move the contents without the help of her grandmother. "Everything is in this box, then?" the grandmother asked, peeking in with a small smile on her face. "Yes, everything," her granddaughter replied, standing only a few paces away. Shorter than her grandmother, this woman was veiled, but not in the way her single statue represented. She had a scarf tied tightly around her head, keeping her dark curls out of her face, even as some spilled out of the sides, and her red dress was loose and long. Her feet were also bare, and she had an air about her that simply reminded one of home. "Good." The elder woman reached into the box and gently cradled the sphere in her arms. She stroked it ever so softly, hearing the murmurs below that no other deity could hear. She moved across the stone floor to a balcony outside where a pedestal was waiting empty. "Grandmother Gaia, why did they need to be moved?" Hestia asked, crossing her arms against the night chill. Gaia simply placed the earth above the pedestal and smiled at the sounds emanating from the small globe. "Because, my darling, their own sun was crashing around them. Very few of us notice them anymore, but I feel it is our job to take care of them." She nodded slightly near the boot-like formation on the globe and turned to wave at Helios as he began moving the human's new sun. "This one shall keep them safe for a nice long time, and when it fades, we will take them and begin anew."
Kim Fukawa has been seen all around Chicago. Most recently, she has worked with the House Theatre, Lifeline Theatre, and Babes with Blades Theatre Company. She is an artistic affiliate and occasional fight choreographer with the Babes with Blades. Our next story is The Pearl Box by Michael Strange. Michael was a born storyteller. His strength is in telling a story verbally, and he has risen to the challenge of translating his skill to the page. Tonight we are thrilled to take his writing and give it back to voice.
I won't miss 9. During the silent hours, the plastic men finally came and took her away. I didn't hear them, though I tried hard to listen for when it would happen. We all knew her time was coming. 9 had gotten wrinkles near the corner of her eyes and lined faces, and they don't stay long in the boxes. When I got first meal after learning she was gone, I overheard 33 say that the plastic ones take wrinkled numbers to the outside world where there are no boxes. 33 says the wrinkled numbers become the flat ones we see on our wall screens. He says that out there they get to have beds and radios and microwave dinners, but 33 is young and stupid. I used to be like that. I didn't like 9, but she knew things. She was the one that told me the flat ones don't live. They're just echoes, she said, dreams from some other time before the plastic ones in their boxes. That's why the flat ones don't answer us when we beg them to take us away to their green world. That's why they do and say the same things over and over again, never learning or remembering what happened before. 9 said the flat ones are ghosts. Ghosts who teach us, but also distract us and keep us peace-like, until our faces get wrinkles and we're taken away. 9 knew that nothing exists outside the boxes. The green world of the flat ones now belongs to the plastic men. I asked 9 why they keep us at all, but she couldn't tell me for sure. She thought that maybe they like to watch us like we like to watch the flat ones, but that never made any sense to me. If the other numbers were anything like the flat ones, I would talk to them more, but they're not. Most numbers are stupid, like 33 is stupid. They're full of tears and nothing to say. I think that's why we all avoid each other and keep to our own boxes. Other numbers just remind us that we don't live in the green world we see on the wall screen. It's really only the rudders that go to the big room to talk to the other numbers, but they only do that for the chance to push up against each other and give the females big bellies. I know that's how it happens. Even though most numbers say that the plastic men give us the babies. I've watched the flat ones talk about the green world with all its buffalo and rhinoceros and wild cats, and I've watched them rutting on the savannah. I hate babies the most. Even more than I hate most numbers. Babies scream all the time and make their mothers cry. That's why I don't leave my box at night, not to rut or even to use the toilet. I don't want anything to do with babies. Their noises or their misery they bring. I only leave my box to get my meals when the plastic men bring them, or sometimes to wash when they open the showers. I don't wash as much, though. Numbers rut in the showers, too, and it makes me sick to hear. I keep to my box because my box is mine, and no one can come in. Even the rutters can't break the rule. 1 number per box. Even else the plastic men come with their electric sticks. Children don't count because they don't have marks on their wrist to tell them which box is theirs. They just stay with their mothers, crying and stinking until they're old enough to get marks in boxes of their own. 9 said my mother was a bitch. But if she was, it was probably because she hated numbers too. I remember watching Flat One say that we are often like our mothers because we come from their bodies. It's like when you cut a piece of bread, it's just 2 pieces of the same thing. I wish I remembered her so I could know for sure. Even if she was a bitch, it would be nice to know someone like me, someone that understood. All I remember of my mother was that she would let me watch The Neighborman on their wall screen while she slept. I still watch The Neighborman even though I know what he'll say before he says it. I feel good when I see him. I like his red sweater, and his voice makes me think of my mother. I only change the screen when he brings out his puppets. Even as a baby, I never liked those. Their smooth faces remind me too much of the plastic men, so I hate them. With 9 gone, I've been thinking more about the Flat Ones in their world. Why it doesn't exist. It makes me sad not knowing why the plastic men keep us in boxes, why they feed us and allow us to watch the wall screens. They don't come like mothers do when the children cry. They don't care when the food makes us sick. The plastic men don't force us to rut or even to shower. They just keep us alive and alone in our boxes. There was a time when I stopped watching The Neighborman and started to explore everything else I could find on the wall screen. Later, they became my favorite times when the flat people would talk about their green world and I couldn't see it. That's where I learned about rutting, when I learned about the blue sphere that hung above the green world, and that there were once things called buffalo and rhinoceros and pearls. I think the Flat Ones really liked pearls. There was a time when a woman with bright teeth and a blue jacket talked about giving pearl jewelry away to anyone who called her, but she said that you had to call very soon. I called her. I called out to the wall screen because I wanted pearls too. But that was when I was dumb and I thought the wall screens could hear me. I know now that pearls are only for ghosts to wear. They made the pearls. Well, the oysters did, but the Flat Ones put the seeds inside. That's what the man said in the green world time. He said that they put little round bits of metal in the oysters, deep down in the pink flesh, and over time the oysters make pearls from them. The metal doesn't kill the oysters, it just makes them unhappy. To make themselves happy again, the oysters cover the bits in pretty white. When the bits are completely covered, the oysters forget that they were once heavy and hard and not really a part of them. But it's just a trick the Flat Ones play. The oysters don't get to stay happy because one day the Flat Ones come and cut them open and take the pearls away. Flat Ones keep oysters in big nets, just like the plastic men keep us in boxes. I've seen babies before they get their own boxes and after. I know that when they're taken away, they come back in their box marks and they have scars on the side of their head. All the numbers have the same scar. Even though we look the same, I think we're more like oysters than we are like the Flat Ones. I think the plastic men put something inside us, something heavy and cold. I think that's why numbers are so unhappy. Just like the oysters, we spend all our happiness to try to cover that bit up. I think the plastic men know we'll make it pretty and white. The wrinkled numbers have no more happiness to give, so one day they're taken. I think now I'll spend more time squinting my eyes. The more I blink and bend my face, the faster I'll get wrinkles and the closer I'll come to knowing. I don't really care if there's no outside, or that I won't join the Flat Ones in their green world when they take me. I don't care that I'll lose my box, the only thing that's mine. I just don't want to be unhappy anymore. I want whatever they put inside me taken out. They can have my pearl.
Rachel Granda-Gluski is a Chicago-based voice actor and movement professional. She currently enjoys working with radio play company Starlight Radio Dreams, available wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. She also performs every summer with the Bristol Renaissance Fair. When she's not performing, she enjoys being a huge nerd and hanging out with her cats. Our next story is The Greenwood Knight by Jeff Harris. Jeff Harris is the properties artisan at the Goodman Theatre and a longtime collaborator with Otherworld Theatre, building props, costumes, and masks. But once, in the long, long ago, he was a writer and director, and is all too happy for the opportunity to put his old suit of armor on. As well as writing a short story for Gateway's writing series, he has directed a short play for Otherworld Theatre's Paragon Festival last fall.
The Greenwood Knight by Jeff Harris. There were 3 of them, Sir Dullahan and his 2 brothers. Each set out from home in search of glory. Each were clad in blue armor, each atop white horses, and each in their own direction. They ventured forth at the behest of their father, who bid them not to return until their names had become rich with honor and fame. Upon his travels, Sir Dullahan accomplished many feats, slayed many beasts, and served many people. Yet somehow, with every new realm he came upon, there were none who knew of him. And so, Sir Dullahan pressed further into the world in pursuit of reputation. One day, the Blue Knight came upon a tree within which many other knights were hanging from its branches, swinging by the neck. Some looked to have been killed mere hours ago. Others were nothing but bone wrapped in mail. He questioned the nearby villagers, and the townsfolk told him the dead knights were those who had challenged their master, the Greenwood Knight of Glengildrew Castle, for his treasure. What that treasure was, they could only speculate, for they had heard many different stories from many different people. But if any of these stories were true, then Glengildrew Castle was worth finding and the challenge worth pursuing. The castle rested in the deepest reaches of the northern forests, and most who sought it disappeared. Yet there were those that succeeded in finding the keep, merely to end up in the tree. Sir Dullahan believed his quest was a bold one, worthy of repute, and asked the villagers how to find the woodland keep. He was told to enter the forest with the sun always at his back. He would then find a post that stood alone in the glade ahead of the castle. There would hang a great gilded horn. He needed only to blow the horn, and the Greenwood Knight would ride out to meet his challenge. The knight passed into the forest, and for days he braved the monsters that lurked within the woods, until at last he crested a hill and saw below him in a dale was the castle. Riding further, Sir Dullahan found the post with the horn, and without hesitation he gave it a mighty blow, which echoed through the forest. He did not wait long before the Greenwood Knight appeared. He was a fearsome fellow, atop a great shire horse. His tunic bore a white stag, and his armor was painted green. In one hand was a lance, the other a kite shield, and at his side was the finest of arming swords. As the Greenwood Knight came close, he raised his visor to reveal a long white beard and mustache. He saluted Sir Dullahan and spoke in a deep voice. "Who is it that would challenge me?" "It is I, Sir Dullahan of Alamir, son of Sir Bertilac," Sir Dullahan replied. "Son of Sir Bertilac? Then you are a lord?" inquired the Greenwood Knight. Sir Dullahan bowed in response, and the Greenwood Knight continued. "Where is your squire? Your servants? Have you no train to accompany you?" "I have not, sir," Sir Dullahan answered. "I have only what you see here, my horse, my armor, and my sword." The Greenwood Knight accepted the challenge, and the 2 knights rode deeper into the woods. he brought Sir Dullahan to the base of a hill upon which sat the keep. There a tent was set, along with a rack of weapons and a large ornate gold chest. The Greenwood Knight referred to the chest. "Here is your prize," he said, "should you defeat me." Sir Dullahan explained the many stories he had heard and inquired what was in the chest, wanting to know for what he was fighting. The Greenwood Knight would only answer cryptically. "Everything," the deep voice grumbled. "Everything that I have, everything that I am." Sir Dullahan then asked what would happen to him should he fall, to which the Greenwood Knight confirmed that he would be hung from the tree in shame until his estate could pay the ransom for his body. The Greenwood Knight offered Sir Dullahan the lance or the sword. Sir Dullahan preferred the lance, but had lost his in battle just weeks before. The white-bearded knight presented a lance of his own from the rack, and Sir Dullahan graciously accepted. The terms agreed upon, each man took his place and faced one another. At once they rode towards each other with fury. Sir Dullahan was an expert with the lance, and lowered the point precisely, striking the Greenwood Knight in the head. But the lance shattered, being made of weak timber. The Greenwood Knight met the blow with his own, hurling Sir Dullahan to the ground. The Greenwood Knight turned his great horse, intent on trampling the Blue Knight to death. Unbeknownst to the villain, Sir Dullahan had not lost consciousness, and just as the Greenwood Knight was upon him, he rose, swinging his sword and striking. The Greenwood Knight fell from his steed, but managed to draw his own sword before Sir Dullahan could reach him. A great melee ensued. For 3 days the two men battled, and the clash of steel rang throughout the trees relentlessly. Not once did they rest, and Sir Dullahan suspected the elder knight's stamina was aided with sorcery. Angered by the mendacious nature of his adversary, the Blue Knight found the strength to press on until he delivered a mortal blow and slew the Greenwood Knight, the master of Glen-Gildru. Sir Dullahan, exhausted, returned to the chest and opened it, only to find it empty. The Greenwood Knight had deceived him one final time. Infuriated, he rode to the castle and demanded entry with sword drawn. But the soldiers there opened the gates, and with uncommon obedience, they took him to see the lady of the Greenwood Knight. In a great hall bedecked with antlers, a beautiful woman greeted him. She, too, was dressed in green and had long braided black hair. She was much younger than Sir Dullahan expected the wife of the Greenwood Knight to be, and he also thought she would be angry or tearful. But at the sight of him, she smiled and calmly asked if her husband was dead. "I have done the deed, my lady, and nobly so. I am here to demand my prize." The lady raised her hands. "This," she softly spoke, "this is your prize. The castle of Glen-Gildru and everything it has to offer are now yours. Its vast wilderness and its farmland, the crops the peasants yield, the game within these lands are yours to distribute as you deem fit." She continued speaking. "Its knights are yours, as are the soldiers and the servants. Its gold and jewels are yours, its food and drink, its fires and beds, even its lady." She knelt before him and kissed his hand and addressed him as Lord. The people in the hall followed suit. He bid her to rise, and asked if he broke the curse of the Gilded Horn or if he were to assume the role of his predecessor. She affirmed that the obligation to answer the horn was the price for unlimited comforts. Each time he was victorious in combat, his wealth would grow. She offered him a chalice. If he drank from it, he would be honor-bound to be Glengildru's champion and master under pain of death, for the chalice was enchanted to the end the life of those who broke their oaths. Everyone who dwelt within the castle drank from the cup, all of whom pledged to serve the keep in their own way, thus never wanting. Even she, whose oath was to be the lady of the Greenwood Knight and attend his every desire. Sir Dullahan queried about how many husbands there were in her life. 7, she admitted. You will be my 8th, and, God willing, my last. She went on to tell him that he need not drink from it. Sir Dullahan was free to refuse the glory, riches, and renown the woodland castle promised, just as any knight was free to sound the horn in challenge. Sir Dullahan took the chalice. If I drink from this, he said, I shall fight with righteousness. I will not deceive my opponents as my husband did. I will treat my foes with deference and hang them not from a damn tree. The people will have many blessings and my justice, and I will bring honor to my father's name. She bowed, telling him that as master, the realm was his to rule as he wished, and she would be joyful that he would do so with such pride and grace. And so, Sir Dullahan drank from the chalice, and all in the hall rejoiced. He was bathed and given the Greenwood Knight's armor and tunic. That evening, there was feast the likes he had never seen. The tables were laden with game and fruits from the world over. 24 barrels of mead were emptied as the finest musicians played through the night. Sir Dullahan rejoiced at his good fortune and counted his blessings. Indeed, that night he went to his chamber and knew his wife well. At dawn, Sir Dullahan arose to a magnificent breakfast and was surprised to learn that his wife had arranged a hunting party for him, that he might explore the woodlands and learn to tame them with his men. But no sooner had she related this to him than the horn did sound. Instantly, he was surrounded with squires who fitted his armor with tremendous haste. Sir Dullahan took to his horse, but before he could exit the gates, his wife begged him to carry a potion. It will give you unordinary spirit to defeat any who stand before you, the lady pleaded. But Sir Dullahan reminded her of his pledge to fight with honor. She insisted he bring it with him, if only to put her mind at ease. Reluctantly, he took the vial, but again vowed he would not use it. With that, Sir Dullahan, as the Greenwood Knight, rode the path to meet the challenger. Upon reaching the glade, he found not one, but 2 knights. Sir Dullahan's heart broke, for he recognized them. Both were clad in blue armor, and both sat atop white horses. Sorrowful thoughts flooded his mind, which turned into shameful ones as he gripped the vial. But then he thought of all he had won. His wife, his wealth, his lands, their influence, and their glory. Like the white-bearded knight he had slain before, the shameful thoughts were fleeting, and so, too, was brotherly love. Thus, as Sir Dullahan approached, he raised his visor but a little, and tasted the potion the lady of the Greenwood Knight had given him.
Rob Southgate is a professional actor in commercials and films, a professional podcaster, and a professional public speaker. He recently released his first book and is busily booking a national tour of the SMG Podcast Marathon. Rob loves sharing ideas with others and creating opportunities for his creative associates. Along with his wife Martha, Rob started Southgate Media Group as a creative outlet and a way to incorporate all of their interests and their past experiences. SMG is home to over 100 podcasts, blogs, and video channels. If you think Rob has a lot going on, ask him about his amazing daughter, Molly. Now I would like to introduce to you the executive producer of Otherworld Theatre, Tiffany Keene-Schaefer.
Hello, Otherworlders. My name is Tiffany Keene-Schaefer, and I am the artistic director and founder of Otherworld Theatre. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special digital edition of Gateways. Ansel has invited me to speak a little bit about how Gateways got started, and I love telling the story so much that I enthusiastically accepted his invitation. It is probably one of the more surreal moments of my life. So Gateways is actually named after Gates McFadden, who you probably know from Star Trek: The Next Generation. She plays the beloved Dr. Beverly Crusher. I met Gates when Gates agreed to be our host for Juggernaut Film Festival, which is Otherworld Theatre's annual sci-fi and fantasy short film festival. Every year we host a bunch of independent filmmakers from all over the world, and we geek out about genre storytelling. It was right when the theater was opening, and she and I were talking at length about running a theater, because she, for a time, was actually an artistic director herself and ran a theater in LA. We were talking at length about science fiction and fantasy programming that were going to be happening at the theater, because the theater was just about to open to the public. And she suggested that we should have an event that would bring together sci-fi and fantasy writers with local actors. And whatever Gates says, I'm gonna do, because it's Gates. She was Beverly Crusher, yes, but she also worked with Jim Henson and taught Muppets how to dance. So if she says to do something, I'm gonna do it. And Gateways was born. We named it Gateways after Gates McFadden. So here we are 2 years later, under the great guidance of Ansel Birch, who has really taken Gateways and made it something that I'm really proud of. And it's just been really something exciting to see. And I'm just forever grateful for all of the artists that have come on and joined our Gateways family. It truly means the world. If you like this programming, please consider watching some of the other videos that we have on our channel. We have everything from LARP videos. We have Super Richard Roll 3, which is Super Richard, but Nintendo. We've got Pickle Rickacles. If you're looking for something with a little bit more drama, Medusa Undone is a beautifully tragic tale. We have the full length, we have the entire show up on our YouTube channel. So you watching this video right now, super helpful. You want to subscribe? Super helpful. Liking this video and leaving a comment, all of these things really help with our analytics and help the theater be able to continue putting on this great programming that you are now enjoying. And now, back to Gateways.
Thank you, Tiffany. Our next story is Too Many Buttons, Never Enough Shoes, a short story of how I, most successful harlot, lost all my marbles. This is by Jessie McCarty. Jessie is a writer and aspiring PowerPoint performer for stage and screen. They were crowned Bagel Queen of the Midwest by Montreal playwright Joe Bagel. Jessie is a company member of Runways Lab Theatre and BFA of Creative Writing at SAIC.
Hello, I am Kat Evans, and this is Too Many Buttons, Not Enough Shoes by Jessie McCarty. I'm drowning in your leverage, public rejection. Did you make the right selection? I mean, look, good job, but I'm a loser in sheets. I don't mind lovelessness. The walls are wood, my floor fine china. I have to tiptoe. That's how fragile living with me is like. And it's like pearl textures, phone cases. Tear the copy of the Odyssey you're reading, please, and look at me. So how's that outside looking from the inside, she asks me, and you pretend I'm dumb, but I'm not dumb. I don't mind lovelessness, but sometimes I get scared of rats in the cage or moths in my bathroom cabinet. Don't go looking in there. Like, who looks at someone's prescriptions? UTI scoundrel. That's your new name. Look, scoundrel, good job. You got me a little terrified now. Of pain. Bloodstains. A wimpy kid and sex chains. Like, why'd you come over anyway? I'm trying to bruise and you're touching me like you want to cuff me. Wait, a pun? Fuck, I'm so sorry. And then look at my fine china, the ground. Look at my walls. Have you ever been sad? Or raised your wrists up to the bedstand? Ever been stressed out? Or ran into the movie theater with a half jar of French fries and a cola holding hands with redacted? Heaven wasn't made for me. And keep your pants on, okay? Eager Nancy over here. Jeez. Have you ever been right or wrong about the state of things? When God said, oh yes, it's a vibe, did he mean all this? I'm running out of sketch pads, and the yearn for the hung-up life ahead is wearing... I'm close to edges. Revenge is a cold, cold pot, and I don't drink tea like that. When all this is over, we're gonna have a whole lot of loving. Ain't we? Aren't we? That's the headline of the news. I screw newest gay on the block after the end of the world and they don't love me. Loveless energy. The tapestry. A box falls out of the ceiling. We knew this would come. A roof made of water can't be frozen for like ever. And in this box is everything, every kind of thing, beginning and middle, end. Fragments of a little white lie I made at 17 haunts me to this day. Stop being nosy, all right? I can't tell you every... Man, this fucking sucks. What would I want with this? Find desire. Yearning for higher. Fucking and kissing, stealing boxed wine at the Walmart for hire. What does all of that have to do with me? I'm not that good in bed. Excited at best. I'm no fate master. I'm no epiphany. Everything is in the box, and you won't burn it. Everything is in this box, and I haven't felt satin in so long. So long. And so long, wind gusts, wind chills. Global warming is an issue, you know. So then Nancy comes over and looks at the box, but she doesn't know what it is. And so we freeze it. After this, Carrie comes over. Shows me all her shoes, and I get jealous and call her a catty bitch because she has been talking to Nancy, and I don't trust them together or what they're saying when I'm not there. Now everyone wants a taste of the frozen cardboard. Now I'm the head honcho, so when I'm the head honcho, people come over. And you know how antsy I get. To imagine guests like entertainers, actors, so close to C-list. Just one more gig they keep bringing. Look, good job. But I have everything in this box, and I can't look inside. Then Nancy comes over one more time, and we kiss and try opening it again. It's all there, she says, my beautiful chicken. That's my 5th grade memory. She stares, and I say, I know, baby, it's everything. We have to bury it. We agree. So we bury it. And burying up memories and the consumption of everything is not and has ever been easy. These are some odes we knew. Prince is still inside, but he refuses to be set free. Every copy of Harold Pinter is in this box. Sadly, impossible to burn. 3 photos of my first hair dye in my early 20s. My girlfriends on a rampage to cancel their ex-boyfriends on the internet. Reality TV shows where social media is the prize. C-list status. $1 million. Grief. Strife. My favorite ice cream flavor. Everything that's inside is inside, and I'm a turmoilistic lesbian. Too shy to say I'm afraid of the ownership of everything, because who wants it all when they finally have it all? Carrie's back, asks for some wine, and we drink it. I do love Carrie, but she rarely talks of revenge like me and Nancy. Revenge is a sour grapefruit. We like to lick, never taste.
Kat Evans has been performing in Chicago since 2006 with theater companies such as Promethean, Black Button Eyes, The Hypocrites, and City Lit. You can see her on screen in a feature film, Non-Traditional, and web series Lucky J, Seasons 1 and 2, Geek Lounge, and Why Don't You Like Me? You can hear her opinions as a guest on Fox Valley Film Critics and Real Geek Girls. Kat is part of the performing and writing ensemble of Starlight Radio Dreams, and is the creator of the audio serial comedy Truth Kittens. In addition to Starlight, you can hear her on podcasts Our Fair City and Toxic Bag. This next story is Waiting by Lindsay Morris. Lindsay Morris is a local playwright and storyteller who lives in Andersonville. She prefers dark comedy and loves to write about all the ways her vagina has screwed her. She performed in dozens of shows in Chicago and recently had a play workshopped with the Agency Theater Collective. She describes her work as Larry David meets Black Mirror.
Waiting by Lindsay Morris. The walls are too white. It's like staring into the sun. It gives me a headache. All this oppressive nothingness. The only break is the clock. Even though the numbers are useless. This is an experiment. Or an accident. I'm not really sure anymore. I've lost track. I probably have forgotten the beginning entirely if it weren't for the clock. It's always daylight. Did I mention that already? The windows are fogged, but the light seeping through, though, it doesn't feel artificial. Sometimes it's brighter, other times not. The difference is so subtle I never would have noticed before all this. Now I measure my life in those brief changing rays through a viewless window. I'm wearing a white dress, just above my knees, short-sleeved and slightly flowy. Comfortable, but not particularly interesting. I have no shoes or socks. My feet are always bare, but I'm never cold. The temperature in this room is a constant tepid. I hate how oppressively accommodating the air is. It's like living in a world with no opinion. My bed has the only real color in the room. Resting on a raised platform, it is the center of my world. The sheets are a soft, hazy yellow, like the phases of the sun, and I wrap myself in them to escape the glare of the walls. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to see another color. I bet it would be dazzling. Starved, I've almost forgotten the range of hues that exist outside of this pure tomb. I know their names, but the images associated with them have begun to fade, as though they've ripped from my muzzled mind. There isn't a door, in case you're wondering. A door is an instrument of utility. A door leads somewhere, opens into something. It can be broken down, it can be reinforced. Even a locked door can remind you that there is more than what currently is. But as I said, there are only these walls. I have no need for a bathroom or a kitchen. You don't realize how much you miss the most mundane of bodily functions until you live a life completely devoid of them. I've had moments where all I can do is fantasize about needing to pee. Here there's no urgency. My body calls no attention to itself. Apparently I'm permanently satiated. Sometimes I think maybe I'm in a perfect world. The peak of physical contentment. That sort of thinking always depresses me. When things get really dark, I do things I know I shouldn't. You can't bang your head on a soft wall and expect any results. I watch the clock. The light changes. 12 hours, 12 minutes? Or perhaps it's been a day's worth. It's so hard to keep a consistent record. When my mind wanders and I don't keep track, things get worse for me. Instead, I try to etch the days in my mind, try to qualify time in the old way. Sometimes my dreams are filled with unfamiliar authoritative voices. These unknowns they're always asking me questions, making demands on my body. What the experiment was, or how I came to be here, is a mystery. There isn't much to distract me from the never-ending boredom. I started to try all kinds of things to keep me going, to keep me sane. I would act out my favorite TV shows. Play all the parts, laugh at myself, imagine that people were watching me, that I was there to entertain them. In those moments, I didn't feel so alone. I could imagine their faces. Rebellious teens with too much acne getting weepy over a particularly good death scene. Bratty kids singing along as I taught them how to jailbreak their iPhones. At some point, though, I began to run out of material. I tried to make things up, but I could see my invisible audience turn away with disapproval. They weren't interested in original work, I guess. My concept of time gets much worse when I sleep the days away. I find that I'm on the brink of insanity when I live in my dreams. The only real break comes from the cube in the middle. Sometimes it isn't here when I wake up. At first, I thought I was misplacing it, but after searching my room 1,000 times over, I realized this could not be the case. The cube. It's white. It has little nubs on the outside that I can feel with my fingers. I move them vertically and horizontally, shifting the cube's outer layer into different spaces. I can't see the changes I make with my fingers, but only feel the smooth, conflicting edges as I rearrange it. I used to think that it held some great answers, that if I could solve whatever the problem was, I could be free, given a pardon from eternity. I've tried every combination I can think of. I have child-sized hands. Someone used to tell me that, I think. At first I struggled to move my fingers around the cube, but now I'm an expert. My fingers constantly moving and forming designs denied to me by my own perception. I gave up at some point. I stopped playing with it entirely for a while. Then on a whim, I went to reach for it, and it was gone. I was scared it had never existed in the first place, but it'd been making short appearances here and there after that. I didn't feel any crazier when I had it in my hands, so I decided that it must be separate, put here by someone. This, I think, is the only reason I haven't completely lost it. The cube is a small, comforting hand. Its presence is a signifier of another thing. Left, right, up, down, sideways. Got to get it before the light changes. I stare up at the clock. Up, down, click, click, tick, tick. Light changes, light resets. I can do this. I've got this. It's almost... Damn. Sometimes I'll imagine the door leading out. I'll picture it so clearly in my mind. It's every detail, down to its chipped paint and rusty bolting. I have dreams where I'm reaching for it. And just as I've grasped the handle, I wake up, my arm stretched out in front of me. I know it exists. How else could I have gotten here? I was not born here. I had a life once. I drove a car, had a name. Well, there's a lot of other things that I did, but I try not to think about my memories too often. In my mind, they've become so faded and overused that they're mere shadows of what they once were. God. Once, I spent an entire 12 minutes screaming. I can't even remember taking breaths. It seemed endless. I got lost in the croaking, pitiful noises emanating from my body. After a few minutes, it felt like the noise was coming from someone else. I felt sympathy for that wounded animal. Eventually, it stopped. It was worse for a long time after that. The silence was oppressive. Librarians worldwide would have rejoiced at the quiet. Nowadays, I rarely speak out loud. Only if I feel a thought is permanently slipping from my mind. Then I'll repeat it over and over again, trying to keep it fresh enough for my memory to grasp. Mom. I say that word a lot. Mom. Mom. I try to elongate my tongue. Place the tip just right so the M sound is distinct. You wouldn't think it was so easy to forget the most important face you'll ever know. Over time, though, my mom, just became a muddy puddle, something indistinct, unreachable. I've tried to rearrange the pieces of her, but each time I lose my way around her eyes, and then the rest of her face slides back into that part of my mind that's already been claimed by these walls. In the absence of everything, it's her love that I long for. And her love I remember most clearly. It's not easy to be a monkey in a cage. It takes effort, dedication. It has become a religion to sit here quietly, to let the waves of anger Slide off me, like an infinite sea. I need to do this. To worship the endless nothingness until there's nothing left. I think I succeeded. That's when something shut off in me. Irreversible and deeply important. Looking back, I can't even remember what I'm missing now. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. I've made so many concessions. Given up so much. Only a small part of me has managed to stay above the numbing waves of this room. It's the part that awakes to the sound of a beep. Faint, but familiar. The sound. I can't quite grasp it. It's been getting louder with each clock cycle. It started challenging the clock in an audio battle. Tick, 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 beep, beep, talk, beep, beep, tick. I stuff the palms of my hands in my ears. I don't like the conflict. I wished 1,000 times over for a new sound, but this is not what I wanted. Everything seems the same, except for the constant beeping. It's consuming me. It's getting more insistent. It's getting inside of me. I can't block it out. I can't breathe. I can't move. I want it to stop. I have no voice. I'm drowning in its monotonous onslaught. Make it stop, Mom. Beep. It was 9 p.m. at night, but you'd never know it thanks to the obnoxious fluorescent lights blaring down on the hospital ward. The coma section, normally quiet, reverberated a steady beeping, bringing Nurse Emma to room 12. The heart machine's rhythmic noises slicing into her much-deserved dinner hour. Thoughts of her half-eaten tuna fish drowning out the sound of her heels monotonously clicking down the hallway. She checked the patient's vitals, adjusted and refilled her catheter, and moved the call button. A tiny square box with prickly little nubs across its surface more firmly into the patient's left hand. Maybe she'd wake up one day and move her fingers. Her hand reached for the remote and turned on the white noise machine that had accidentally been turned off. The doctors insisted the soothing noise was a constant comfort to the unconscious. Having finished with her patient, Nurse Emma began the walk back to her desk, her thoughts already returning to her dinner.
Jasmin Tomlins has been making noises with her mouth for 33 years, most recently as a determined vintner on the streets of the Bristol Renaissance Fair, reading all of Shakespeare online with 14th night players, and of course, here at Gateways. She is grateful for the opportunity to give voice to these stories and to receive the meaning that stories give voices. Our next story is On Hermit Crabs and Old Boxes by Andrei. Connor primarily writes children's fantasy and the occasional flash fiction piece for contests and for fun. He has also written a play that was a finalist in the Indiana Repertory Theater's Young Playwrights in Progress contest. He aims to bring engaging and accessible stories to children while feeling like a writer of serious adult fiction. The natural deviation in humanity between the individual and the group runs central to everything he writes.
On Hermit Crabs and Old Boxes. The wise man sat in the shade of a small tree on the edge of the beach. The waves lapped slowly onto the pristine white sand. His eyes were closed. He listened to the sounds that washed over him, the gentle waves, the gulls overhead, the constant whir of bugs all around. He wore a contented smile on his face. He had his arm draped over a small wooden box in the sand next to him. It was a good life for the wise man, a life of peace and of wisdom. He waited in the sand just like he did every day for a visitor to arrive and ask the same question that they all asked him. Miles away from the white sand beach, Greg sat on a plane. He gazed listlessly out the window into the clouds. His face was rough with stubble. He had no luggage, just a rumpled-up suit and a tie pulled loose around his neck. He looked like a man on his way home from a very, very bad day at the office. In fact, he had had a very, very bad day at the office, but he was not on his way home. 5 days earlier, Greg left the office for the last time. He left with no job, no purpose, no identity. His lonely apartment felt even lonelier as he dragged his feet and a cardboard box full of personal effects closer to its door. So he dropped the box on the curb and kept walking. Maybe someone else would find comfort in that stapler or in the framed diploma that had hung on his office wall. Greg let his feet do all the thinking, and his feet thought, "We need booze." The next few days were a blur, bar after bar, liquor store after liquor store. The drinking was all he could remember. Everything else, what he ate, where he slept, who he talked to, that was all lost. Greg would never remember it, and frankly, he was glad he didn't want to know. The next thing he could remember was waking up in a field 100 miles away from home. He still wore his suit. His tie was even still tightened all the way up to his neck, top button still fastened. If it weren't for the grass stains and the smell, he would have been ready for work. When he rubbed the sleep out of his eyes, he smelled the unmistakable aroma of permanent marker. His hands were covered in black words. Written all over was the word why. Just why. Not even a question mark. It was shockingly legible. He was undoubtedly drunk when he wrote it. Arguably, he was still drunk when he read it. But it meant something to him. Why? He muttered out loud. He got up off the grass and dusted himself off. He was determined to learn the answer, the reason. He needed to know why, to understand everything. Under the palm tree on the white sand beach, the wise man whistled a song. His pursed lips were concealed behind the tangle of brown and gray hair that was his wild beard. With great intensity, he watched a hermit crab on the soft, damp sand by the water. The hermit crab pulled itself out of its shell, its claws digging into the sand to find purchase. It gained its freedom and scuttled away from its old safety. The wise man stopped whistling as he watched. It occurred to him that though he had seen much in his life, he had never seen a naked hermit crab before. It somehow looked both perfectly normal and horribly obscene. The hermit crab scuttled across the glistening white sand to another, slightly larger shell. From where the wise man sat, it looked as though the two shells were exactly identical. Maybe the second shell was a little larger, but the crab in its new home scuttled away happily. Perhaps, he thought, it was a distinction known only to a crab. Perhaps the crab could tell that the new shell was roomier, different, but it felt just as safe as the old one. Huh, said the wise man. Greg left the field as soon as he could and began his journey. He started small, asking random passerby if they knew the truth, if they knew the meaning of life. Most people merely shied away from him, crossing the street or holding their hands out while saying, "I don't know, please leave me alone." But Greg was nothing if not persistent. His persistence awarded him with some answers, though none were satisfying. To find true love, one person replied. Another told him that the purpose was God. Several people responded by telling him he had to look for happiness. One added that it came from within. Something was gnawing at Greg, telling him that the answer should be deeper than that. Greg's persistence also awarded him a night in jail. He spent the night on a hard wooden bench in a holding cell somewhere in Ohio. He laid back on the bench and stared up at the ceiling. His mind was swimming with questions, and he still had no answers. In such a short time, he had gone from having his life completely figured out to being completely, hopelessly lost. His whole life, he had believed that his purpose was to work hard and lead a normal, respectable life. But with everything stripped away from him so quickly, so thoroughly, he knew that there had to be a greater reason for this life. That was when he noticed that there were scratches on the ceiling. Right next to the fluorescent light were shallow scratches, just like the ones on a bathroom wall. Greg was certain that they must say something, so he got up. He stood on the tips of his toes on the bench and ran his finger across the scratches. They were letters, so he read, "Under a tree on a white sand beach." There were more words on the wall beneath the little window, so he crossed the room and read. "There is a man with a box," it said. Greg scanned the cell quickly and found more scratches in the corner near the floor. He laid down on his stomach to read the last message. That box has all the answers. Despite the fact that there must be thousands of trees on white sand beaches, Greg could see this man with his box, and he knew exactly where to find that specific tree on that specific white sand beach. In the morning, he was released on his own recognizance. He was told not to leave the state of Ohio. By 11 a.m., however, he was on a plane. That plane took him to another plane, which took him to another plane. He loosened his tie as he sat next to the window, soaring over the Pacific. He ate a bag of pretzels that the flight attendant had given him, savoring every bite. For the first time in days, Greg smiled. Really, truly, and honestly smiled. The wise man looked up to see Greg, disheveled in his filthy black suit, walking slowly up the beach to him. It occurred to him that it had only been a few days since his last visitor, and only a few more days since the visitor before that. Perhaps his visits were getting more frequent, he thought, or perhaps he had never really bothered to keep track. He tapped his hand lovingly on his little wooden box. It didn't matter how often they came. It only mattered that they did and that they learned. Greg knelt in the white sand before the wise man. He didn't have to kneel. The wise man was no god. But he knelt anyway because it felt right. I need to know, he said, his voice hoarse from the dry saltiness of the airline pretzels. The wise man merely smiled at him, his thick, wild beard parting to show the curl of his chapped lips. Greg continued, I am no one, and I have nothing. I need to know my purpose. Where do I fit? He spoke like a man who was pleading for his life, because perhaps he was. His voice rattled and cracked. There were tears behind them waiting to be shaken loose. The wise man said nothing. He simply lifted his arm off the little wooden box and pushed it across the sand to where Greg knelt. Greg nodded, a tear welling up in his eye. He slowly, carefully lifted the lid and peered inside with reverent glee. But then his face fell. It's empty, he said, his voice hollow. The wise man looked deeply into Greg's eyes and asked, What would you put in it? Greg sunk into the pure white sand and fell onto his back. He cried and he laughed. The wise man watched. Huh, he said.
Martha Southgate is co-founder and brand manager of Southgate Media Group. She has been podcasting for 7 years and has recorded over 1,000 episodes. She also homeschools her 13-year-old daughter Molly and works as a volunteer once a week in an elementary school. Martha is an entrepreneur and passionately studies leadership and marketing. She loves supporting and encouraging others by sharing her experiences and is about to release her first solo podcast, Broken to Brave. Our next story is Watch Your Back by Kat McKay. Kat specializes in gays and sci-fi, both as an actor and as a writer. Favorite roles include Diana Barry in Anne and Diana Were Totally Doing It, in Fern/Fest at Otherworld, Bella in Valkyries, Badasses on Bikes, and Alien in Engage, Choose Your Own Sci-Fi Adventure. Her play, Plaid as Hell, is the winner of Babes with Blades 2019 Joining Sword and Pen competition and the Margaret Martin Award, and will be produced as part of their 2020-2021 season.
And then she was gone. Inside the box was an ordinary watch, gunmetal black, its face almost as big as the back of my wrist. It looked like it was sized for a man, but when I clicked the strap into place, no links needed to be removed. It fit. It was honestly the gayest piece of jewelry I'd ever put on my body, and I loved it. She had promised to explain everything, and now all I had was this really cool watch. I didn't want to think too hard. That had clearly been a this is over relationship conversation. The watch was just a weird bonus. But if she had all this months we'd been dating, especially when she'd practically been living over at her place, why had I never seen this before? Whatever. Cass's birthday party was in a couple hours. I had enough time to get cleaned up and find something to wear. Fuck. My favorite dress was still at her place. I checked my pocket, still had her key. Why hadn't she taken that back? I texted her, Hey, I'm coming over to get my stuff. I hope that's cool. Typing bubbles. Really? She was gonna hit me with that 5 minutes after breaking up with me on Damon in broad daylight? Your ex-girlfriend? I text back. You know, Evie, we've been fucking for the last 6 months. She texted back. Wow. Okay, I got on the train and planned a scathing retort for when I reached her apartment. Blake, I yelled at the stair. It's Evie, I'm coming in. I want to get my stuff. I unlocked the door and stood there. The apartment was wiped clean. Nothing in it. No furniture, no sign of human habitation. I'd say move-in ready, except the layer of dust covering everything. I sat down on the floor. This wasn't psychotic. It just wasn't even possible. I had woken up in this apartment this morning, and Blake was freakishly neat. Even if she had time to clear out, which she didn't, that didn't explain the fact that this place looked like it had been abandoned for weeks. And who let a perfectly good, actually affordable Chicago one-bedroom sit empty like that? Blake? I moved through the apartment, but there was nothing. I caught a glimpse of color behind the bathroom door. My favorite dress hung on the towel wrap. There was a note, pinned in Blake's handwriting. Watch your back. B. Just then I heard voices on the stairs. Loud, several men's voices. Searching through the floors below, I heard them kick open a door. Shit. I grabbed my dress and beat it for the back stairs. I heard them slam into the apartment right behind me, and I threw myself down the narrow wooden stairs, hitting the ground and running for the alley. I'm not much of a runner, but there is nothing like the anger of your girlfriend ditching you in the weirdest of ways, combined with the terror of a group of strange men chasing you out of what you thought was her apartment to give you a little extra boost. I felt my wrist vibrate, but didn't slow down. I put on speed as I made it to the street, seeing a car coming around the corner straight towards me. The car turned to follow me. I sped up. Felt my wrist vibrate again, and the street around me was gone. Or rather, it was the same street, I thought, but utterly dead. Plants grew up through the cracks in the concrete that hadn't been there a second ago. I stumbled over a spot on the sidewalk where a tree root had pushed up the pavement and fell, skinning my knee. As I stood up, the back of my neck prickled. I turned around slowly. The plants and the roots were to the end of what was wrong with the otherwise familiar block. There was no one. The men who had been chasing me were gone, as was the car. But there was no one else. No one walking a dog or strolling along the sidewalk and hanging out in courtyards. I looked at the windows. Some were broken, all were dark. Although it was still daylight, so that wasn't unusual, right? The hair on the nape of my neck still hadn't calmed down, and then I saw it. As I completed my circle, a curtain flashed up on the window of the apartment I had just left. Someone was watching me. I walked around the front door, looked at the window of her place. Nothing. I went to the front door, but before I could get my key back out, the door swung open. Inside, autumn leaves covered the front hall, unswept. It was May. What the fuck was going on? The inner door, too, was broken, so I crept up the stairs as quietly as I could. When I reached the door, though, it was locked. I tried my key. It worked.
Evie, you came.
I jumped back. It was Blake, but there were wrinkles around her eyes, and she was... that white hair in her short crop? Blake?
Yes, it's me.
What's happening?
This is 5 years in the future, Evie.
How?
The watch I gave you sends the wearer through time when you reach 730 mile. No offense, but I wasn't sure you'd make it.
Ouch.
Sit, I'll make you some tea.
Wait. You gave me a time-traveling watch while breaking up with me? And this is 5 years in the future, and you're still here when just a second I was in this apartment and everything was gone? None of this is making sense, B.
I know, I'm sorry. I needed... One sec, Chester's hungry.
I heard a cat meow in the other room. You got a cat? You never let me get a cat.
Yes, well, you technically didn't live here, did you?
Why do you have a cat? I said as she carried a lean, rough-looking tabby in the room. You're allergic.
Chester eats all the vermin that keeps coming in here. I can't really do without him.
Vermin? Why don't you call a landlord or an exterminator? She laughs. It's not a nice laugh. Not a laugh I've ever heard before.
There's no landlord, Eve. I guess you could say I'm squatting.
What happened to your old apartment? Why was it empty when I came?
I should probably start from the beginning.
A kettle starts shrieking from the other room.
1 second.
She comes back in with 2 mugs, one with its handle broken off, full of watery tea. I take a sip and spit it out immediately. What? Oh, God, this is awful. What is that?
Willow bark. It's easy to find and makes decent tea in a pinch.
Define decent.
Tea is a bit hard to come by these days, seeing as it doesn't grow here natively.
You need to start telling me what's going on now.
Evie, I wasn't completely honest with you when we were dating. I'm not an EMT. Or rather, I'm not just an EMT.
Okay.
I'm part of a group that calls itself Lavender Menace.
Wait, what? Really? Like, from the 70s?
It's a homage, but the important thing is we're time travelers.
Time travelers?
Yes, I recruited you.
Why?
I'm getting to that part.
You're scaring me.
5 years ago, or about a year in your future, there's going to be a pandemic. I came back here to help.
Here?
I skipped forward about a year, starting helping in overwhelmed hospitals.
You didn't get sick? She shakes her head.
Got really lucky, I guess.
What was this pandemic like?
It was bad, Eve.
What symptoms?
It was basically the flu.
That doesn't sound so bad.
Do you know how many people the flu kills in a normal year?
No.
Okay, well, it wasn't the flu, is the point. But unlike SARS or MERS or Ebola, not everyone who got it got horribly ill. Not everyone got ill enough to notice even. Which meant a lot of people were asymptomatic carriers. And even for people who did eventually get sick, symptoms took days to show up. Days they all wandered around, traveled, went to work.
So, what happened?
It decimated Italy. Germany wasn't hit so bad. America...
What?
America was the worst. The states all took their own approaches.
She breathes out.
It would overwhelm the hospitals in one place, and as it started to calm down, there'd be a new outbreak somewhere else. Just wave after wave of it. Chicago was hit particularly bad. When the first set of restrictions were lifted, everyone just went crazy.
And?
More than 6 million people died, just in the US. There was never a final count. Lots of people died without making it into a hospital. Lots of people died without being tested. In a hallway, on a stretcher somewhere, plenty of bodies weren't claimed. And, like I said, states
did their own thing.
Right. It was impossible to get an accurate count.
So why did you recruit me? What do you want me to do?
I'm going to send you back.
What? No, why?
Tell people to stay the fuck at home.
Devon Elizabeth is a Chicagoland area performer and musician. Most recently, she performed with Elgin Theatre Company's radio play, It's a Wonderful Life. Other places you might have seen her include performing at the Bristol Renaissance Fair with Pub Crawl, Alma in Vera Voce's production of Christmas Schooner, and sharing her obsession with Disney with Drunkenly Ever After, a live-streamed performance found on Facebook. She is thrilled to be a part of this production and hopes you enjoy the show. Tabitha Burch has been performing since 2003, primarily in outdoor events. She is a makeup artist and character designer whose creations you can follow at Opera Ghost PTO1 on Instagram. You may also know her as Grace O'Malley at the Bristol Renaissance Fair. All of this is, of course, merely a hobby next to her true calling as a serving maid for her 2 beautiful cats. Thank you for watching. I am Ansel Birch, the curator for the Gateways series. I am also the producer and host for the comedy variety show podcast Starlight Radio Dreams, which is available wherever podcasts are downloaded. Please visit starlightradiodreams.com for the podcast, as well as information about our next live event. I am so proud to be producing this content, and I hope to be making your life nicer in some small way. Thank you for joining us here at Gateways. Please consider leaving us a review and following Otherworld Theatre on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more news about this show and all of their upcoming events. You can also subscribe to Otherworld Theatre podcasts on your favorite podcatcher and visit our website, otherworld.blueberry.net. That's BLUBRRY.net. Now get out there and write something.